Morning all. You join me again in an early morning, and despite the beauty of the morning, it's very misty out here. Um, One of the reasons I'm up so early is because I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep because I the thing that I was alerted to just before I went to sleep last night was the fact that the Le Pen in France has been skewered again by the establishment, and she's apparently come third, despite every opinion poll said she was going to romp to a commanding first place. And and of course the liberal media all cock a hoop. France has rejected racism. Rejected the far right and all this sort of stuff. And we've been here before with the French. You know, I've noticed in the last couple of elections, the last two, maybe three elections, that they have the same thing has happened. Is they've gained more and more popular support. They um, end up, they approach the election with a real chance of winning, and at the last moment, the the liberal establishment gang up on them and make sure that they don't win. Now, assuming the elections are genuine, and of course these days that's a big assumption, but assuming they are, democratically that's not illegitimate to do that. They make alliances. Um, their system is different from ours. It's not a first past the post. I'm not quite sure the details of it. Um, but this has happened before. The first round they get stonking amount of support, and then at the last minute, despite what the opinion polls say, suddenly they get pipped at the post at the last moment. Now, like I say, if this is a genuine um, political manoeuvring, um, then that's one thing. And I've been guilty of, in the same way that I've been guilty of not supporting Tommy Robinson early on, believing him to be, the nasty, horrible, oikish racist that everybody said he was. Um, so I remember a time, a few election cycles back, believing that believing the media narrative about Marine Le Pen as being a horrible, nasty racist, and I remember, to my shame, agreeing with the liberal media establishment that that the forces of decency and toleration and civilization, um, and uh, the French ethos of liberty, fraternity, and equality uh, has won over the forces of racism and fascism, and that in the end they did the right thing and made sure that she couldn't win. And of course I'm just I'm obviously ashamed of that now because that's not just nonsense. Um, but so many people still seem to be falling for that. And I'd set quite a lot of hope in the French to finally break that stranglehold they have over so-called popular opinion. Uh, and because as we are going into full-blown socialism with more immigration, more trans shit, more um, blasphemy laws designed to protect the Muslims, um, as well as the you know the as the authoritarianism on steroids that Starmer was promoting um, at the height of the pandemic, when he was encouraging, the Feffel Johnson, the Conservatives, to go harder and more authoritarian all the time. There's all of that to come, and we always knew that if the Conservatives get destroyed, we always knew that we were going to have to go through this, and that's that was always a sobering thought. It wasn't something that to be taken lightly, but I guess many people like me believed that the destruction of the Conservative Party was necessary, um, even at the cost of having a almost out of control, utterly inept socialist party in their stead. But I had set my hopes for the elections in France, and the right wing um, anti-immigration thing was had. There was great hopes for Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and she immediately just turned into establishment drone, almost immediately. There's Geert Wilders, who, that they ganged up on him as well to make sure he couldn't become prime minister. Um, and of course, he said some conciliatory things about the establishment, about the EU, about NATO, um, even though he's not prime minister. Um, and what's happening in Germany? The alternative for Deutschland, um, and then the establishment attempts to sideline them, to outlaw them. And it seems they'll use every trick in the book to stop, you know, a sensible, popular, patriotic nationalist force coming to the rescue. So this is somewhat depressing. And I think we are entitled to ask. I think we are entitled to ask, considering this has happened uh, to Le Pen and her party, considering it's happened numerous times now. I think we're entitled to ask to inquire as to whether this is a genuine election result, or is if there's something else going on here. You know, you know, is it legitimate to question the result of the election? Well, I think it is. I'm not saying that the election was rigged. I'm not saying that, but I think it's entirely reasonable for there to be some investigations about it. But of course, the investigations will be conducted by the establishment, who will look into it and they say we've looked into it and there's nothing untoward, and there you go. And it seems normal, sensible, rational viewpoints are just prevented from ever getting into power. I mean, I refuse to believe that I'm any kind of radical. I have normal centrist opinions. I have fairly strong opinions about some things. But I just don't. I mean, of course, nobody believes they're an extremist. Of course, they don't. Um, but but most of us, our opinions really haven't changed over the years. I mean, my opinions have changed in detail. Um, just an example, in my reappraisal of Tommy Robinson and of Marine Le Pen, I believed one thing. I was told to believe one thing, and I believed it for ages, and now I don't believe it. But my core beliefs haven't changed. I mean, what is changing is adherence to certain principles, which I've always adhered to, which I find are unsustainable now. They're untenable, as we should say in a political sense. Yeah, and one of those, for instance, is the idea that anybody born within a nation's borders is by birthright a has a birthright of that nationality, and of course it's simple to believe that, and when numbers of immigrant children were very low, that was easy. That was a principle that was easy to adhere to. But when it's being gained and people come over here with 4 wives and have 25 children, and 25 children that grow up hating the country that they were born into, that you have to think again, and your principles do have to be reassessed, and and yes, they have to be compromised, and this is something. This is difficult for me because, you try to live on principle, and so you have a principle, and then someone games the principle to make so we'll say, well, so what you're saying, people who are born here can't be British. Well, I suppose I am saying that, and of course the difficulty with that is that then you feel that you've then compromised your principle on something that was clear. It was clear, and it could be unsullied because it was clear, and then millions of people come along and sully it. That's weird, isn't it? How over the passage of time you can be a normal, ordinary, sensible patriot. 50 years ago, everybody was a patriot, pretty much, apart from a tiny set of people in bloody Islington, or what the equivalent of Islington was 50 years ago, the Bloomsbury set or something. Pretty much everybody was a patriot then. And without changing one's opinion at all, you become a far right racist. Funny how that happens, isn't it? We haven't changed. They have. So I'm not feeling particularly positive this morning, despite the beauty of my surroundings. We seem to be getting thwarted at every turn. But we must continue to push that boulder uphill. We can't weaken. Stay free.